Let me just mention, since it's 1 o'clock, thank you for joining us. I'm glad everyone is able to join us virtually. As you know, Door County Reads is coming up in the very end of January, early February. If you haven't picked up a book, you might want to do so. We have run out of some of them here in Sturgeon Bay, but then we keep getting new ones. So always be sure to check. They're also on Hoopla, if for anyone who likes to use digital books. And the programs are getting lined up now. The kickoff this year is going to be all virtual. So if you go to doorcountyreads.org, you should be able to find the schedule. And since it's the 15th year, they're doing a little memory of the past programs. So that'll be kind of fun. And of course, Michael Perry will be coming. He just announced on his Facebook page yesterday, I think, that he was coming here.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a different thing from heavy books that we've had in the past, although he does write in heavy subjects, but he's got a little humor involved with it. So I hope you can all join us, and many of the programs will be virtual live. So be sure to check on what you can join from down there in Florida and wherever else you are. So let's see. This book was very complicated, in my opinion, very complex, and the author herself is very complex. So I just wanted to share with you, I was finding various resources, and I mentioned to Adele. Adele thinks she's the one who recommended this book, right, Adele?
I think I must have, because I've read it twice now.
Yeah, and I started reading it twice because the beginning, to me, the first time I completely blanked out on who was who and all that. And it does make a lot of difference when you start rereading it. It makes a lot of sense. So some of the resources that I found are online, and I'm going to quickly show you. If you go to Door County Reads or doorcountylibrary.org, and then go to our calendar, I thought this was the best place to put it. On today's page, I put a few links that I think you may enjoy, since people do, like I like to research the background of all these things. So this is pretty cool. This is a Random House PDF file kit, they call it, for book groups. And it does have cocktail recipes. It has history.
Oh.
It has a synopsis of some of the characters. There you go. You can try those.
Oh, nice.
And then the discussion groups. I thought that was kind of a fun thing. So I included that. And then this is a really good interview with her. That's an hour long, but the reason I included it is she's very interesting and very humorous. I think you'll really but it is an hour long, so have a look at it if you're interested in a kind of funny interview, in my opinion. Then I kept wondering, of course, we all wonder about the title and the poem that comes from. So I found it, the English and translation of the poem, and I put a link here in case you want to read it. So the title, of course, refers to Chile. And then finally, there's so many characters in this site. If they do a book, they have everybody, and that's kind of helpful. Now, if anyone's going to join us, not for the Michael Perry book, but the one after that, The Girl with the Louding Voice, is that the title?
Yeah.
They have a link.
Yes, that's the title.
Yeah, there's also a link to the characters on for that book on this website. So I put that on the page for that book in that'll be in March. So if you get confused by characters, that's a really good list. So let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, to go on to about Isabel Allende. She really has quite a background, and this Wikipedia page sort of gives you an idea of what she's written. It's pretty amazing, right?
Oh.
And then the other thing that I found out, which is kind of fun, is if you remember last year, Door County Reads, we did Station 11.
Right.
And so I had to
Yeah.
subscribe for 1 month to HBO Max to see that version, which I don't like that well, to be honest. Has anyone else seen it?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Oh,
But they have done a there's a 3-part mini-series about Isabel Allende. It's in Spanish, but they do have dubbing in English also. So you might want to try this out. It's kind of fun. And it does a lot on her early life, and it doesn't go too late, but it's kind of fun if you happen to have HBO Max. At some point, I'm sure they'll put these things on videos, and then we can get a copy for the library on DVD, but I thought I'd give you the heads up on that. So let's get started. What did everyone think? I really thought this was such a complex book and really important because it reflects this history of these countries that are flipping between dictatorship and democracy and socialism, and it's kind of what we're seeing in the world today. So it's so relevant, even though it goes way back.
I agree.
What does anyone want to jump in with an opinion?
I thought it was an absolutely
I wonder-
wonderful book. Thank you for whoever recommended it. I was absolutely awe-inspired that these people could continue and that these people could have hope given what they had dealt with. I didn't think it could get any worse, and it always did. They persevered. That's what I got out of it, that there is perseverance and that there is goodness. And I found it amazing.
And I'll make one comment on that. I watched that couple interviews, but she did say that this was one of the easiest books she ever wrote because it's all based on real stories. And all she had to do was type them down as if she's a journalist.
yeah,
You know, there's
so easy.
people. And to-
I'm the
Sorry.
one who recommended it. I read it last spring and then I recommended it to Laura and she added to the list. And I'm grateful for that. And then I read it again. I'm just astounded at picking up on Tressa's comments, the resilience of these people. And that R word kept coming into my head. They picked themselves up, they brushed themselves off, then they moved on. I don't know if I have that capacity.
Oh, I think you do, Adele.
One of the things that I wanted,
Go on.
one of the things that I want to share is that I had found out that while we were reading this book, Chile has just had a election and they've elected, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, they've elected the youngest man ever to run Chile. He's only 35 years old. His family is from Patagonia, originally from Croatia, and they've been there for more than 200 years in South America. But I just thought it was interesting that they have a newly elected leader, and I can't imagine somebody only 35 years old. So it seemed kind of, with all the politics that were in the book as well, that we have this tie-in with Chile right now. I'll be anxious to watch how things go. Like,
Yeah, I was following that too. And he's a socialist. He basically wants to bury the legacy of Pinochet. So
Yeah,
it would be interesting.
yes, he does. Yeah.
His opponent was a far right person. So you seem to not have politics in the middle in Chile. It's either far right or far left. And for the moment, the far left is going to prevail. But we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
Right. And the author's own father was involved in politics as well. So she's got, that kind of a story to
And her uncle
tell.
Her uncle is the Allende mentioned in the book several times.
Right.
Oh, it is. Okay. I
That's
wondered about that.
That's her godfather and uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing she said in the interviews, which I think is interesting, is that you can't really it doesn't work well to write a book based on research, as well as it does to talk to people who have actually been through the experience. And the fact that she's been through that, I think, really makes her book strong. The fact that the stories she includes are all pretty much firsthand stories of experiences that makes it really, really hit home.
Right. And isn't that the truth about so many stories that, it's all the firsthand, or the first person can be so relevant.
Like she mentioned that one, it didn't, she say something like 3 books on philosophy, stop a bullet or something like that? Wasn't there some line in there? She said that's really true, but it depends on which books they are. So those are all incidents that she writes about. They come from real stories, which is amazing. Here's someone else coming in.
It made me think of what is at the surface a very different book, that 40 Thieves on Saipan, that was written by a former mayor and resident of Sturgeon Bay. And he wrote it first as a straightforward third person recounting of what had happened to these young Americans in the South Pacific at the Second World War. And it just wasn't going anywhere. It was cold and it got rejected by publishers. And someone advised him that he should rewrite it as though, so that it would read like a novel, but it was based on the stories of the soldiers. And he brought in a professional writer to help him recast it. And when you read that book, it reads in a way like Allende's book does. I mean, even if you didn't know, that Allende has based this on the real stories, but it reads like fiction completely, but she hasn't made it all up, and neither had he. I don't know how many of you have happened to read the 40 Thieves, but it's worth reading.
And that's his father he's writing about. It's kind of interesting to me that we've read a series of memoirs in this group. I had Octar's book, which he billed as novel, was really a memoir, I think. And when you think about it, there's a lot of books that kind of go over that line between memoir and fiction. So that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yes.
I think the fact that you knew this was based on real fact made it even more poignant in their perseverance and their resistance. It wasn't something she made up, it was real, which is all the more poignant for me.
Yeah, like
Right,
I had,
and the part where we began with Franco, and I still read other things about the Spanish Civil War, and I really needed to sit down and think a couple minutes about which one always is the nationalist and which one is the republic. So I do agree with you that historical piece kind of led to the rest of it, and I'm very gratified that it went back a little bit to the Spanish Civil War, from which the rest of this story came out.
yeah, and I also picked up on that. She mentioned
because it was about immigration, and there isn't just only immigration to this country. There's immigration all over the world, and South America in particular has large immigrant communities. And the fact that they're incorporated and they become, and I don't remember, I read this books ago, I don't remember who the main character is, but he becomes totally Chilean. Chile is his country.
Right.
That it starts out with. And I thought that was really an important part of the book too, in terms of the immigration process, because I personally am part of Irish and English immigration that totally became part of this country. And I think we forget that generations of people back, she just handled so many things: perseverance, immigration, hardship, love, kindness, humor, restaurants. I mean, she had it all. It was great.
Right, and I wanted to bounce off of that based on the immigration, and in the story, when the Chileans, some end up in Venezuela where they're welcome. So we have that kind of immigration. And when I picture Venezuela, I don't think about them being that, you know, open to immigration and so forth, but they still missed their Chilean background and how many of them still wanted to go back. So I totally agree with you that there's so many different kinds of immigration in this story, and that they just want to find their home and they want to find the right place to be.
Yeah, and I found she does mention a lot of real people all the way through the book. This Elizabeth Eidenbenz, did you pick up on her in the beginning? Victor had a crush on her. Do you remember her?
The Red Cross nurse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's movies about her.
Well,
You can start looking her up. I mean, pretty amazing people all through the book. Neruda and all of these people that she brings to light.
Yeah.
I didn't know that much about them. You hear these names, but she really makes you start thinking about a different part of the world, I mean, than we often encounter. And it spans from Spain to South America. But the idea of the countries flipping from dictatorship to socialism to dictatorship
Yeah.
is so amazing. I mean, we see it today all over the world. Hungary, for example, is going through a dictatorship. In Turkey, of course.
Mhm.
Who knows where it's going in the future? Venezuela is another one. I didn't realize, I mean, I guess I knew that they had a lot of oil and they were wealthy, but the way she portrays it here is very interesting. And they're going through
Yeah.
change too. So,
In the case of the, excuse me, in the case of the second shift, it was with the help and the aid of the American government that overthrew Allende.
yeah.
Yes,
Because they
Nixon,
felt
yeah.
he was a Marxist, but even though he was a benign Marxist, they wanted him out. And Nixon and Kissinger maneuvered that whole thing.
That's right. The CIA.
And then that's
was
what
involved.
resulted in General Pinochet.
Yeah.
yep, that history we all sort of heard, but this really brings it out, doesn't it?
Mhm.
And now today, what tactics are we taking towards these countries? I mean, look at the political history throughout the whole world. It's a little chaotic.
Especially in the Middle East. I think we have tried to influence elections and outcomes there, not always very successfully. I think Iran is a prime example. They were nearly a democratic, nearly in the third world. And then we ousted a leader there, and you see what we've got.
Mhm. That's right.
Yeah.
There again, Henry Kissinger
You know, something else
was
I
critical.
was thinking about when I was reading this.
Okay, first one, let's see, who was talking?
Carol was
Carol
talking.
was saying something about Kissinger,
Okay, Carol, and then
then Jean.
And Jeannie.
Carol?
Henry Kissinger was also critical in that situation, and that Jimmy Carter did not want to admit the Shah for medical services in New York at the Sloan Kettering Institute. And he knew what it could result in. And Kissinger made a plea to him because he and Kissinger had a tight bond for years and years over oil interests. And he pleaded with him on humanitarian grounds. And Jimmy Carter, being a devout Christian, caved and let the Shah into this country. And of course, we know what followed.
Everything that Carol, I'm interrupting Jean, but everything that Carol has said is historically accurate, but to my knowledge, but listen to what's getting said. We, the United States government, is making decisions about what other countries should do. Is that right?
No,
I mean, Henry Kissinger thought one way, Jimmy Carter thought another way. We change our opinion every 4 years. Do we have a consistent opinion? And because, I don't know, there's just all kinds of things that I'm thinking. Yeah, critical of going from Allende to Pinochet. We just went from Trump to Biden. Is there a difference? I mean, I really want to use the phrase, and if you don't want to go there, don't go there. And I could be taking us on a path that we shouldn't be going on because it's not the book. But who died to ask God to tell the rest of the world what to do?
Well, and now we want to hear from Jean.
Sorry.
Oh, it's almost an arm of what we've been talking about is what is the role of the Catholic Church in this as well? The portrayal of, I know about the not getting the divorce, but if they can find a place, they would get a divorce. How about the bishop who takes the babies and, for money, it appears as though there's some sort of profit making there. In the countries that are Catholic, but what is the role of the Catholic Church in all of this, and where do they stand as the different leadership, as their different politics in their, not only their country, but countries all over? I think that there's almost a character in the book as well as the hold that the church has, and the way it's portrayed here in the book.
I was somewhat horrified to discover what I guess I should have known, that the Catholic Church was backing Franco in the war.
For sure.
Yet you do have Catholics that interfered, like in Central America, like Bishop Romero, who were totally different than the Catholics portrayed in this book.
Yes.
I don't know. It might be more of a thing because of the country that they're in at the time, rather than the Catholic Church as a whole.
Or a power situation again within the church.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I watched the whole miniseries on Isabel Allende on HBO Max, but in the beginning she started writing for a magazine, and she was sort of very challenging to traditional values, you could say, and the church, and she became known as a feminist. So she was talking, this is back in, I don't remember what era, but she was writing about the pill and this sort of thing. And of course, that's all challenging the church. So that's, there's a lot of that in some of those cultures, but then they're silenced. They were silenced eventually. So a power, a matter of who's in power, right?
Yeah.
I was very interested in the family structure of the Del Solar family. You had Laura, the wife, the mother of these 5 children, and then Isidoro, her husband, who just sort of walked around in a cloud until his daughters did something he didn't like, or his son. And then you had Felipe. I just found that a very interesting family, and I assumed that was typical Chilean, but I'm not sure. Does anybody have any idea about that family? I thought that was very interesting.
Well, they were higher social status than the others, than the Del Maos. One quote on the Reader's Guide list is the Del Maos and the Del Solars are in vastly different social classes, but are thrust together due to their circumstances. How are the tensions of war experienced differently by the two families? So that sort of speaks to what you're saying, Adele.
Yeah, I just found it very interesting, the various attitudes. And then when you looked at them 30 years later, where they were, what they were thinking about. And then the priest, of course, was practically in bed with that family, metaphorically speaking. I just found that fascinating, that whole family situation. I believe that may have been typical of South America in the 70s and 80s, but I don't know that for sure.
I would agree with you that it was typical in the 70s and 80s.
Upper class, of
a traditional wealthy family. That's the way I would describe them. Traditional wealthy conservative family. That the men ruled the roost. And remember, the church is run by men.
And then he had this son, this Felipe, one of his sons who formed this Club of the Enraged, which sounded, those meetings sounded so interesting to me that they were engaged in.
Well, which of the characters did you like the best?
Oh,
Them?
Rosaire.
Rosaire.
Rosa,
Victor,
Victor.
Victor was my favorite.
And why? Anyone have a reason?
Victor remained himself and steady. He was always true to himself regardless of his circumstances. And all of these historic events and traumas, personal and social, that were thrown at him and that he was thrown into, he was always Victor. Whereas Rose had a slight tendency to be somewhat self-serving. Whereas Victor never was. He had a pure heart.
Well, she did start out in a pretty rough situation. So she had to sort of, watch out for herself, you could say. She was in an abusive situation before she was adopted. But
That's one of her survival techniques, having been a goatherd in the hills, growing up very poor, being treated very poorly just because she was a woman, and not being allowed to practice any of her potential talents. So she developed that, I think, as a defensive device.
But she did risk everything when she broke with her mentor and patron who had taken her in and provided her with a piano and education. And eventually she moved out and went to live in a very poor situation with the other three women near the waterfront or somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
She made that choice, which was more in the interest of her soul than in the interest of her material well-being.
well, does anyone have a comment on the various types of marriages we see here? There's so many different ones.
and at different points differently.
Which of the marriages do you think was the most successful? Not necessarily the ones based on love.
Well, in the Del Solar family, it worked. Culturally, it worked. There was Isidoro, the father, who ruled the roost, except that Laura called the shots. I thought that was a successful family arrangement for all concerned. It would not have suited me, and it wouldn't work in our culture today, but it definitely worked in upper class Chile in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Kind of
Except her.
Except what?
Except for Laura, who
Yeah.
wanted a quiet life and was happiest when she was at home and could read on her patio and
And
her
pray.
be busy elsewhere off with his business friends.
Yep.
What about that sort of, it wasn't arranged, but it was like an arranged marriage between Rosaire and Victor. What do you think about arranged marriages in some cultures?
It was definitely a marriage of convenience so that they could get on the ship.
I wouldn't say, I would agree with Adele. It was a marriage of convenience. Arranged marriage implies to me that someone says you have to marry this person. And in most cases, it's a male telling a female, it's an older male telling a younger female, you have to marry this person. Much the way I think Laura and what was the Felipe's father's name? Much the way I think they were married. Much the reason I think that she preferred to be away from him and he preferred to be away from her.
Isadora was a man there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, you do what you have to, or at least that's my understanding of an arranged marriage that works. Once children are produced, you can do what you want to a certain extent. I mean, you can't go off and be a feminist and get to, teach, you can't go off and have a career, but you can retreat to your silent patio and hang out and do what you want. But she produced children first. So, but I would say that Victor and Rosaire's marriage was a marriage of convenience that grew into a marriage of great respect and great love. Maybe not sexual love, but great understanding of and respect.
Yeah, they really made their relationship work, I think.
They made it work from the beginning. They had to.
It took several decades, but it got there.
He also shows,
I have a question on that.
yeah,
Do any of you have thoughts on that when she mentioned maybe not sexual? Where did that renaissance of sexual loving come from many, many years later? To me, that seemed a little odd. Between Victor and Rosa.
I understand what you're asking. It didn't seem odd to me. I just think that they got to a point of such respect for each other and such understanding of each other, it just evolved.
Yeah, I think it was a natural evolution. They knew each other so well. Rosa, she was so wise in her understanding of Victor. Like when he had this affair with Ophelia, she knew that was going on even. I thought her wisdom and reading of his personality was phenomenal. And somehow they developed a relationship that was pure almost, especially in the final years of their life.
I think it was a factor too that he was her lover's brother. There was a family component to the whole thing that I think too made their relationship come together eventually. And the son, the son was his nephew, and I think that also was important in that relationship.
And they shared the Catalonian culture and history. That was once they got to Chile, they were outlanders, and that they were both Chilean. They were newcomers to Chile, but they had the Catalonian connection, and that was probably fairly unique. That was a sharing that they had with each other. He did meet one other Catalonian man, and he made a restaurant with him. I can't remember that person's name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, one thing that I've noticed with Isabel Allende is she writes a lot about love and passion and having affairs. And she actually did a TED Talk about passion. So he is portraying various forms of passion that don't necessarily lead to good marriage. So it's kind of interesting to see how she plays with that. And it sounds like in her real life, that's how she lived. So the fact that she established a stable relationship with someone that didn't start with that passion is kind of interesting too. Because, if you listen to her interviews, it's pretty funny. Like one thing she says at the end is, I always wanted to write a book about an erotic book, but I'm too old now. I can't remember how it works.
Oh, is that right? Is she divorced, right? Is she divorced?
I don't know what
Or
her
she-
status is now, but
she
she
married?
was married a few times.
Yeah,
But is she in this country? Does anyone know?
I think so.
I think she lives in California, I think.
Yeah, I thought so. And she
Yeah.
talks about following an American man or this sort of thing. So she was always having these affairs, kind of like the characters,
And I think
Didn't we read a book about her called about the Japanese gardener?
Japanese lover.
Japanese lover, yeah. That was Elizabeth.
Okay, I
Allende,
have
right?
her,
Violette.
yeah, I have her book that'll be out at the end of the month.
Ooh, advanced copy?
this is Violetta, the book that'll be out by her at the end of the month. So I'll let you know how erotic it is. And I'll bring it to the March meeting for anybody who might want to read her, the book that's just coming out now, I think at the end of January. So I'll let you know.
She's 79 years old. I'm reading this to you from Wikipedia. She's on her fourth husband, who she married in 2019. And she's an American citizen.
Okay.
And I'm trying to figure out where she lives.
California.
She's gotten the Nobel Prize for Literature. She's had the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
She's really quite a prolific writer.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
really,
looking at her webpage. She's been
Yeah.
married 3 times.
Oh,
well, maybe 4 now.
Yeah.
No, you're correct. I read it wrong.
Oh, 3? Yeah.
oh,
Well, she's really some
She stays
character.
married for a considerable amount of time, from 62 to 87, 88 to 2015. And then now in 2019, when she was in her middle 70s.
good for her.
What?
Ideas about sex and romance are different too in different countries. And they mentioned during the Spanish Civil War that the women involved in the war kind of let loose, it was sexual freedom because of the war, and things like that make a difference, the history of your country, what's going on in the country make a difference. So,
For whom the bell tolls.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of a general sentiment when you're involved in war? Like, we don't know what's going to happen, so let's not miss out on anything.
Mhm.
That was in one of the character situations, right? Which one was it? I forget. Said that very thing.
I think it's
It
necessarily
was Grocer.
Latin culture. I think that's generally, at least that's my impression. Generally, that idea when you're involved in war, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think a lot of people gave up their, supposedly it's such a dated statement, gave up their virtue because he was going off to war. And I may never see him again, I may never experience this. I don't know. I'm of a generation that gave it up totally, okay?
Well, anyone have anything you want to talk about? It's kind of hard when you're doing Zoom to have everyone jumping in the same way as.
I love the little digs of humor that she sticks in there. Just every once in a while, you chuckle at something. It's just like a sentence or two, and it just made me chuckle. Like, despite being English, they served an edible meal. Talking about England. And she has one about Juana, the housekeeper, and Laura.
Yeah.
Mistress was preoccupied with complex negotiations with the saints.
Yeah.
Just way with words and the humor that with it, I thought was great.
And that's what I saw in that interview. You should watch
Yeah.
that interview because she's just keeps saying
Yeah.
kind of funny little things like that all the time.
It's just unexpected. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, she sticks it in there and it's like, whoa. Yeah,
And she can do it in any language,
yeah, right, yeah.
which is pretty remarkable.
And she herself was in exile in Venezuela too. I found it interesting. Why did they, Venezuela is not right next to Chile.
No.
I don't know, you'd think they'd go to Argentina or something, or someplace closer, but maybe they were just more welcoming in Venezuela. But apparently Isabel Allende spent quite a bit of time there too as an exile because of her family.
Because of the name and her relatives, yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah, but.
And she said she was what
If you look at the history of South America, when they're going, and when Isabel Allende went to Venezuela, Venezuela was a different place is
Right.
now. Again, it goes back to power. Who's in power? Who's dealing with it? Venezuela is not, it was more welcoming. Argentina was not. Argentina, after the Second World War, accepted a lot of Nazis, Brazil. But Argentina accepted a lot of exiled Nazis. So I think that Argentina was more conservative.
I don't know. I was a Spanish major in Madison when in the 70s. And I didn't keep up with politics, but I remember my Spanish teachers talking about Chile back then and talking about Allende and Pinochet and what was going on there. And so when I read this book, I thought, oh yeah, they were all talking about this and what's going on in Chile, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting to me to hear her take on it too. And
That's one thing I like about the subject of this book group, Multicultural, which predates me, is that it does introduce us to different cultures in this way through literature, which I don't know if I would have read this one, but you know, I really find her a brilliant writer, brilliant.
And her first book, House of the Spirits, I have
Yeah.
not read, but I had the paperback copy of the book at my house for a long, long time. And my daughter in high school was reading, she reread it at least twice. She
Wow.
read the book and I thought, I gotta read this because she likes it so much. I should read it. And I started reading it and it's this magical realism
Yeah.
stuff. And I just couldn't make it through it.
Oh, it's so good.
I thought, oh, I'm gonna go back and try to read
Laura,
that.
your
Try it
comment-
again, try it again.
Your comment about, I tried to read House of the Spirits and I didn't like her. And for years I didn't pick her up. And when this book was recommended, I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. I'm not, and I was just like, wow, was I wrong about her? But it's a different genre. But A House of the Spirits, which is what she was really well known for, but you don't get the Nobel Prize for Literature for just The House of the Spirits in this. Everything else must be pretty good too.
And I did notice
But I
one-
agree
Go ahead.
about House of the Spirits. It's very not a genre that I read, so.
Right, but it's common in South America. But she mentioned the Trueba family, and I noticed in this book, when the rich family was on the ship over to England, they mentioned sitting at a captain's table with Senator Trueba, and I thought, she's referring to the Truebas, you know, in the House of the Spirits, or bringing back that family, you know, or that idea, because the woman, Senora Trueba, talks with the dead, and I thought, that's from House of Spirits, you know, but
Do you know the basis of that book? I mean, I didn't read the book, but in that interview, she talks about it again.
Oh, okay.
It was, I think her grandmother told these stories and then her grandmother was dying or something, so she had to write down the stories. And there's something about January 8th, and I think it was like her grandmother or someone was dying on that day, and so now she starts writing a book every year on January the 8th.
I did hear that. I read
Which
it
is coming
someplace.
up in a couple days.
Right, yeah, she'll be starting a new one.
Yeah. So, you know, when you think of it in those terms, those were stories that she had to get down for someone else in a sense. And she also mentions magical realism versus fantasy. And the difference is with magical realism, it could actually happen. But fantasy is more like fiction, could not happen necessarily.
I did plow through Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book with magical realism, but I found it tough. It's like it won so many accolades and everybody liked it, you know, it was a famous book, but I found it tough to read.
And I found that, you know, always Americans seem to have trouble with magical realism, whereas it's very popular in the Spanish literature, Spanish language literature.
Yeah.
What do you say about that being a Spanish major?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think you really have to suspend disbelief. And just go with it in magical realism and just get in it. And then I like it.
Okay, you like it?
I do.
Well, good.
But you have to just kind of go with it.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah.
If anyone wants to read another one, I recommend Daughter of Fortune, because it takes place in the California Gold Rush. The
Is
couple
that right?
from Spain to San Francisco.
Is this Isabel Allende or magical realism in general?
Isabel Allende.
Oh, thank you.
One of her books, yeah.
Thank
If
you.
anybody wants to read another book, I recommend that one. Because it takes place in America.
That's how she ended up in California, maybe?
Yeah, well, but
Yeah.
she probably wrote it when she got here, but
Yeah.
I don't know what year it was. But that was the first one I read, and then I went on to the House of Spirits after that.
Yeah, that, and I keep coming across that idea of the refugees. I mean, look at how we're going through so many different refugee movements in Europe, here, and the attitude, it's always that they're lesser people.
Right.
The whole Asian thing with the last book we read with Charles Yu, and the Asians being treated as, you know, really low-class citizens and not allowed to, well, vote in this country and all sorts of things. And yet there's so many people who are refugees, not because of choice. They don't necessarily want to leave their homes.
She talks about globalism too. My copy of the book, there's some stuff in the back, and one of the phrases, she talks about how everything has become global except for people. You know, our economy has become global, disease and health has become global, everything's become global except where people are allowed to live. And in this book, which was published, must be after the pandemic, I don't know. But it says she mentions we cannot solve the pandemic in Wisconsin. We have to solve the pandemic in the world. You know, I thought that she picked Wisconsin was really, I thought, what does she know about Wisconsin? But yeah, she just picked a Midwestern state, I'm sure, but.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's true that people are really known for their home or their culture.
Right. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
An interesting way that things get leveled out is food.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. Everybody knows how to make lasagna. Okay? 100 years ago, only Italians knew how to make lasagna. Lasagna is a very accepted part of our culture. Think about tacos. They're a very accepted part of our culture. And I'm thinking of, I can't think of this guy's name. He's a chef. I think it's
Samuelson.
Samuelson.
Marcus Samuelson.
Yeah, I think he had an incredible PBS series where he goes to a different city and he goes to restaurants, and the equalizer the equalizer is food. Because when you eat somebody's food and you really like it, you know, you want to know about them, and it eventually becomes part of your culture. And I don't think we think of lasagna and tacos as Mexican and Italian. We think of them as lasagna. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
but I think that food is a very interesting way.
You remember we did his book a few years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, then that's
Yes,
why
chef.
I know about him.
That
He
one
also
really-
did a PBS series that was fabulous.
Yeah.
Was thinking of the influence that people have and where people wind up. Like all the Afghanis that were at Fort McCoy, they at least understand what cold weather is, okay?
Yeah.
But think of all the Somalis that are in
Minnesota.
But that was one place that Samuelson went and did food. And that was a way that people were beginning to accept things.
He went to Minnesota, you're saying?
I remember he did Somali food because it's a type of food that I know very, very little about. And without somebody explaining it, if I read the recipe, I would find it unappealing. I remember being struck with the next time I go to Minneapolis, I must find some Somali food.
But this kind of goes along with what you're saying, Trissa. One of the things he brought out in the television shows, he would go to the neighborhoods For example, you go to Chicago, you go to an ethnic neighborhood to find the food. His point in part of it was that as the years go by and generations go by, we all kind of, spread out, and you can't find those enclaves as much anymore. They're all over, they're everywhere. So what you said is kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that happens in immigration, because think of the difference between the son. The son was very different than, he didn't remember, he wasn't Catalonian, he was Chilean. He didn't have.
You mean Marcel?
Marcel,
Yes.
totally, he was only Chilean, that's
Right.
all he.
Yeah.
May I recommend a book about food and cultures? It's called Taste Makers, and it's by Maykuk Sen, Mayyukh, last name Sen. And it's about 7 immigrant women who revolutionized food in America.
Could you repeat the author again, please?
Mayyukh Sen, first name, uppercase Mayyukh, last name Sen, uppercase Sen.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Older or new, or what is that?
It's new to me because I just read it recently. I'm not sure when it was published. But a friend of mine who's very interested in cultures and the way food bridges the gap. And and I think one of you mentioned about lasagna. Well, until the GIs came back from Italy, World War II, Italian food was not popular here. No one had heard of pizza. In the Italian neighborhoods, they would walk around with their little cart selling slices of pizza, but only Italian Americans bought it. But when the GIs came back in the 50s, having been stationed in Europe, it just took over America. And it's very dominant now.
Mhm.
I have a recommendation that's a memoir and it has a food connection. It's Crying in Hmart by Michelle Zahner. And it's about her life and her mother's death and their connection through food, recreation. She's Korean American, and it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Crying in Hmart. An Hmart is a place you can buy Korean food. And apparently in many big cities they exist.
And that is the hottest new ethnic food that
It is. Yeah.
it's.
And this book will probably contribute to that.
Tastemakers is brand new. It's listed
Yeah,
as
it's November 21.
2022?
well, on the cataloging, it's 2022, so it's brand new out there.
Wow.
In Hmart.
That's on the best lists of like last year and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you spell Hmart?
H hyphen.
Capital H Mart, capital M-A-R-T.
Mart, H Mart.
Like Kmart.
Yeah.
Kind, but different.
Heidi, could you just repeat the title? What's the first
Yeah.
part?
Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, Zauner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I always like to get a hold of those books if we don't have them here.
Yeah.
It looks like there's more copies of that than the other book at this point. There's lots of copies. Maybe we should put something like that on our list for the next. I do enjoy those food books.
Yeah.
And in the olden days when we would have our
Potluck.
ethnic dinners in July, wasn't it? That
Yeah.
was always fun.
Yeah, the potluck in July. That
Potluck in July, yeah. That was
Days.
pre-COVID.
in the long far past.
It seems like a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Someday we'll be back to normal, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those two recommendations. I'm gonna definitely look into those too. And also the program on PBS. Do you know the name of that one? This-
I think if you put Mark Samuelson, PBS, I don't know. I honestly don't remember the name.
It's been around for a long time.
Yeah,
I would
it's
say
been
around.
five,
Yes, it
some
has.
years old, yeah. I can't think of it either.
Laura, you can figure out anything, so I'm sure you.
Library. That's your superpower.
I'm writing them down. Yeah, and I'm always, of course, trying to get copies of things for the library. The trouble with videos and things these days is everyone's marketing them in different ways.
Yeah.
So some series people will they'll put out maybe 2 series, and then the third one they'll have only online, and people will come in and ask for it and they can't get it because it's being streamed here or there. So it's all kind of crazy these days.
Yeah.
The way things.
Excellent job in negotiating. Thank you.
Well, does anyone have anything else to mention? We're coming up on an hour.
I'd just like to say Happy New Year to everyone and thank you very much for a great discussion.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You too.
It's just great to see everybody. That's really, really nice.
Thank you.
Laura, when I spoke with you yesterday, you mentioned that you thought they were going to make a mini series about this book. Do you have some information about that?
I don't know about this one for sure.
Okay.
No.
I think this would be a wonderful series.
There is you would think so. There is that mini series about her, the Isabel one that I showed you. And that was made for Spanish TV. So you never know, they may be making things that we haven't seen here. I don't know, Spanish TV, Hispanic language TV is very popular in some places. I lived in
It is in
Chicago.
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I
have
lived
lots
in,
of Spanish stations.
we had a 50% Spanish population in Glendale Heights where I worked in Illinois. And there were so many things involved with Spanish TV, these series of learning English and all this sort of thing. That's all we heard about. So that's a whole cultural thing that I don't think we have here so much in Wisconsin.
Do you know if Station 11, the TV show, is coming out anytime soon?
It's out.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it's on
I've watched,
HBO.
let's see, I think there's 10 episodes and I've seen 6 of them. They come
So
out
it's on-
2 a week. HBO Max puts them out 2 a week.
Okay, thank you.
HBO Max. Mhm.
Maybe someday it'll be on DVD. I don't know, but
It's not the same as the book, though.
yeah, I didn't
Parts that are, but it's not the same as the book.
Okay.
Yeah, they went off.
remember during Door County Reads, we had that talk between Patrick Somerville,
Yeah.
whose mother used to live here, and he did the screenplay or, helped to produce it. And Emily St. John Mandel, she has a brand new book out too, by the way. And I have to agree, they really changed a lot from the original book in the program on TV. Many of the things I don't like. I like the original one.
So it's not worth getting HBO just for that.
So, it depends. Everybody has different, watch that Isabel thing too.
Ah,
So my sister taught me that you take all of these things for 1 month.
yes,
Oh.
that's right. I did that.
Ooh, yes, yes.
So that's what I'm trying, but for the holidays.
Especially when they offer them for 99 cents. What do you got to lose?
Those deals, those are really good. Yeah. And then next month, we're going to be, of course, doing Michael Perry, who is not, is local culture. And I hope that you'll all join us. We're in the list, we're focusing on truck, but we can really talk about either one. Has anyone read them?
Yes.
Read both
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah,
Both of them? So we can
Why
just.
was Michael Perry chosen, Laura?
good question.
People wanted something more, a little lighter, you could say.
He's been to Door County a lot.
Yeah,
Wisconsin, I mean, I just think I think we don't need to know. I mean, I just didn't get it. I think he's been overdone.
well, I can't say, but the idea was to get other, think about what he writes about, trucks and fixing trucks and farming and.
Broaden the
Different
base.
target audience.
Okay, broaden the base.
Yeah.
I think he's been to right on Door County. I think he's taught there.
Yeah, and that's part of it. There's connections there.
But he's
So-
good. He's an entertaining speaker. He's an entertaining musician.
Entertaining.
Yeah.
He's a
That's
very
it.
entertaining musician. There's no doubt about that. And he's a
Yeah.
great speaker. I've seen him several times.
Yeah, I know. I saw him too. But I think it's more just trying to focus on Wisconsin and to focus on, maybe a more light, popular, not popular, positive sort of book as opposed to being too depressing this time. Like last year, we did the pandemic, right? And I think coming out of that one, people wanted to see something that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I thought that was excellent, but still, I mean, we chose Station 11 before the pandemic,
Oh,
and then, wouldn't you know? that happened.
What was the name of the Minnesota book that there were windsurfers?
What was that?
What was the name of the Minnesota book that was about a Minnesota author and
Lee Finger?
The Sentence by Louise Erdrich.
no,
That one? No,
no.
that's about the pandemic too.
Oh, I'm talking about a book that was by a Minnesota author.
Oh, Lee something or other.
Well, anyway, on the windsurfers talked, there was windsurfing in it, and Door County windsurfers talked at the Egg Harbor Library. And I get what you're talking about, broadening the base, because I saw people at that I'd never, ever seen it, anything book oriented. As a matter of fact, someone said to me, see, Trissa, I'm at a thing that you like.
Well, and, you might, if you go to that kickoff, you might see something from, say, the Threshery in Velmy. Think about the farming in the area.
No, so I get broadening the base, and I'm sorry I was narrow-minded about him.
One thing that I'm looking forward to is a talk that's going to be given by a university professor who studies languages. And he's Joe Solomon. So that might be kind of fun because he'll talk about the different languages in Wisconsin. And of course, we all know and Polish and the different ethnic groups have influenced how people speak in different parts of the state. So that's what he specializes in.
Linda and I heard him speak at the senior center at the ADRC a few years ago, and he's very good.
Wow, yeah. See, I'm kind of fascinated by that and some of these things you see of these characters on, like, does anyone know Manitowoc Minutes?
Yes.
Yeah,
And it's pretty funny how he imitates that accent, but my brothers used to do that when we were kids, the local accent, and theoretically, Joe Solomon studies all of those things, the colloquialisms around the
well,
state.
you know how when you're in your own space, you don't think you have an accent.
Yeah.
Well, you don't. Recently was in Philadelphia, and we needed to get across the street, and we needed the police. It was during the Mummers Parade. And we needed the police to move the barricades for us to do it. And I turned to these other two women that I was with and said, let me do the talking. They'll know I'm not from here immediately. They'll know I'm a tourist. I'll play the card and maybe they'll open the barricades. It worked. Are you? No, I'm not. And they sound, I can't tell you how Italians sound so typical, so stereotypical of like that Jersey accent. I heard it all the time. I had people say to me, you're not from here, are you? And I'd be like, I'm from Wisconsin.
Yeah, so if you start thinking of Michael Perry, there's some really fun things like there's some photographers from Manitowoc also who made it big time, but they take very sort of stark pictures of Wisconsin people. I can't think of the name now. I would think to maybe involve them,
Thank
but
you, Laura. I appreciate knowing that I was narrow-minded and that you've opened my eyes. Thank you.
yeah, there's all sorts of fun things that you can talk about. And we're sort of going on the theme this year of celebrating Wisconsin, the library system. So this is the sort of beginning of that.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about what's behind it. You can make something good about a lot of books
Yeah.
if you look for the good side of them. This book would be really good to bring up discussion of immigrants, wouldn't it? This-
Yeah.
what we just did.
Oh, this one,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was.
Definitely.
Yep.
So that's one. I mean, I've recommended books from our book group for Door County Reads in the past, like American Dervish, which was really interesting at the time. So who knows what's coming next year?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming here and for Karen being here with me in the room. Well, okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody.
Happy
Bye-bye.
everybody.